Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today, The 7 Deadly Digital Sins of Manufacturers and Distributors, presented by Andy Didyk and Tara, VP of Sales and Marketing, and Johan Boström and Rivers, co-founder and evangelist. To cover off on our agenda today, we'll discuss a welcome and housekeeping item, introductions, followed by the presentation and a brief Q&A session. Some housekeeping items for today. All participants are muted. You may ask questions using the Q&A panel in the GoToWebinar menu. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. If time is too short to address your questions, you will receive a response via email. Today's webinar will be recorded. For our live attendees, the webinar recording will be provided 1 to 2 days after today's webinar. It will also be made available on the InRiver website. If you are experiencing any technical complications, please use the Q&A panel to communicate. So what are we selling? To understand a little bit about the digital ecosystem, it's important to note InRiver sells PIM software, and Tara sells services. Our conversation today will be a success if we provide real value to you in understanding how PIM can be transformative to manufacturers and distributors alike. With that, I'd like to hand over to Andy Didyk of Tara.
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate your introductions, and thanks everyone for attending with us this afternoon. It's great to have you. My name is Andy Didyk. Just by way of introduction, I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Tara, a digital agency, and my role here is a strategist for B2B and B2C e-commerce, digital in general, and I also run our new business and account services portions of our business. I promise we won't spend a ton of time on this, but just to tell you who we are, if you're not familiar with us, Tara is a full-service digital agency. We were founded in 1999. We've always been digital. We're part of that old school digital original folks back from the 90s. We're headquartered in Johnson City, Tennessee, just like the Wagon Wheel song, and we have offices in Nashville, Asheville, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Our agency is specialized in 3 verticals. Our largest area of specialty is branded manufacturing and distribution. So we're really happy to have this audience today and to be able to share some of our knowledge there. We've been focused in that vertical for over 12 years. And the services that we offer range from consulting, customer segmentation, primary research, and that sort of thing, all the way through the actual building of websites and operating of them, including product information management implementations and technical integrations. And with that, I will turn things over to my co-host, Johan Boström with InRiver, to introduce himself.
Thank you. My name is Johan Boström, and as you probably hear, I'm Swede by descent. I moved here to the US 4 years ago, so I'm now working from our office in Chicago. I've been in the PIM business for over 20 years, which you can probably see. I lost all my hair trying to convince everyone that PIM is the solution for successful omnichannel commerce. InRiver as a company is a focused software vendor. We deliver a SaaS-based multi-tenant PIM solution, and we got offices in many places in Europe, in America, and of course in Asia as well. We cater over 500 customers and over 1,000 brands in 21 countries. And we have over 200 partners and 800 certified individuals within that partner network that helps us with the expertise and to provide that domain knowledge that Andy and Tara stands for.
Thanks, Johan. With that, we'll transition into the bulk of the presentation today. We just wanted to tell you a little bit about our company so you knew where the point of view is coming from. But both Johan and I, in our various journeys in the digital space, have spent a lot of time talking to manufacturers and distributors. I probably speak to, on average, at least 50 to 60 individual manufacturers and distributors each year. And over the years have been able to put together sort of a list of things that are common among those folks in the industry that we would consider the 7 deadly digital sins of manufacturers and distributors. Now, to get into this, I think it's important that we start with some definitions. So we went back to the dictionary because I don't have a theology degree. It's in media communications instead. And sin is defined as an immoral act considered to be a transgression against divine law. We define it as just not being good for business, or instead of divine law, maybe it's the law of commerce and the almighty dollar. These are the things that are causing strife and challenges to growth within manufacturing and distribution. Also dusted off my Western civilization textbook to look back at how the Greeks and Romans defined sin. And this is really fun. I don't know if everyone remembers this or not, but going back to ancient Greece and looking at Athens, the Senate there would once a year take a vote on which individuals they wanted to shun and excommunicate from the city, and they had to live in exile for 1 to 10 years after that. They had the opportunity to do that each year. And the reason for that is that sins in the democracy, just like sins in the business, it causes separation. It causes challenges where we don't get along with each other in the way that we should. And in ancient Greek times, it caused separation in the community itself. If we go and look at how the Romans looked at the consequences of sins, it usually resulted in death. They were a little bit less democratic, if you will, with the solutions there. And they actually, in their mythology, and in the Greeks as well, had Furies whose sole existence was to cause lifelong suffering on earth due to the sins that happened in their world. So while things aren't nearly that grave with the digital sins, they do result in definite challenges that are stumbling blocks to businesses growing. And the way that sins manifest themselves today look more like being acquired or being overrun or simply not existing anymore as a business because you don't move fast enough with the times, because digital is so critical to being able to do that. So with the history and the theology lesson aside, we're going to get right into the digital sins and talk about what they are, why they happen, and what you can do to avoid them. The first digital sin on our list of 7 is overconfidence. And we define overconfidence, this is something we see all the time, as having manufacturers and distributors having more confidence in your sales team than in your digital assets. We hear this from executives and managers frequently who say, our relationship is all business. It's all about relationships. And we don't really need digital in our world because the sales folks have these relationships that are long-standing in the community, and that's why people choose to buy things in an undifferentiated space. To escalate this challenge even further and take a look at the disconnect that exists within manufacturers, Gartner cited that 88% of B2B sales reps believe servicing accounts above and beyond customer expectations is the surest way to grow. And doesn't that sound great? Who doesn't agree with that? However, almost 70% of the B2B customers that were surveyed don't trust that the companies they do business with understand their needs. And the primary way that those customers were interfacing with the B2B sales organizations was through their representatives. So there's obviously a huge disconnect and challenge here where the personal relationship and the graying of that sales force brings in a reality that means that this doesn't necessarily, reality does not reflect what everyone's assumptions are in the manufacturing distribution space. B2B buyers consult multiple digital channels and seek advice from colleagues, all before engaging with a sales rep. So in many cases, manufacturers and distributors can lose the B2B sale before it even starts if the digital presence isn't in place as it needs to be. And I'm sure, because it happens with those 50 or 60 folks I talk to each year, there's somebody on this webinar saying, oh, that's not the way it is in my business. Because I hear that all the time. But let me tell you that if it's not today, it will be. And Amazon Business is coming for you, even if you don't think that they're going to be there tomorrow. They certainly will be next year. Finally, if we look at customers, we'll talk a little bit more about their journey, the B2B buyer, but they return to the digital channels. Not only they don't do it just before the sale, but also after the sale, or right at the end of the sale, rather, and after the sale, to validate the supplier's claims. And in the same Gartner survey, 15% of the customer purchase process was spent on deconfliction of information. And isn't that a fun word that you didn't know that you were going to learn today? But deconfliction meaning, hey, the information says one thing on this site, it says another thing in this sales slick, and the rep is telling me something else, so I don't know what to do. That's a significant amount of time being spent not knowing what it is, what's coming next. Additionally, I mentioned earlier the graying of the sales force. In 2 short years, over 50% of workers will be considered millennials. That's huge. Over 85% of the newborn babies being born today are being born to millennials. They are not just the kids with cell phones. That's actually, especially the younger generation is now Generation Z. Millennials are comprising an enormous part of the procurement and the buying process within the branded manufacturing and distribution space. And they treat things very differently and have very different expectations than other generations. It's not all digital. Sales reps still play a very important role, but understanding who they are and catering to them is a very important part to overcoming overconfidence. As a final data point here, 83% of surveyed B2B buyers access digital channels even late in the purchasing stages. So if you look here, what's interesting to me is that when defining that journey, they hit the supplier website early, as we talked about. They also hit it in the middle of the journey to compare solutions and learn more about specific supplier solutions, and also late in the purchasing process. There's a double checking that takes place and a validation of the representative's claims, typically before that transaction takes place. This is happening more and more on repeat orders and reorders as well, which is something that no one really saw coming because people are expecting those to go to machine transactions. However, prices always change, products always change, and people are always interested in getting the best deal. So it's very interesting. That's what I see from my view of the manufacturing and distribution world. Johan, I'd like to ask you what you see from the product information management standpoint when it comes to overconfidence.
Well, thank you, Andy. I think that we often forget the salespeople when we talk digital. I mean, the buyers today, they're really empowered by that transparency and the access to product information that the internet can provide. But the salespeople also needs to be at least as empowered as the buyers they are selling to. So let's say you have product recommendations on your web, you should definitely consider on providing that to the salespeople. And that of course goes for your product information. Your salespeople should not be less empowered than the buyers, whether we're talking about the product specs or the bundles or the kitting or the solutions that they sell. So don't forget the salespeople.
That's a great point. So now we're going to show you, after each sin and defining what it is, how to save yourself from that sin. So how do you save yourself from overconfidence in your organization? Now, admittedly, in my years of consulting, this has to come from the top down. This is a C-suite or certainly VP level decision to help incorporate digital in ways that assist the sales team and complement their efforts. But that being said, once you have that buy-in, giving customers an entry point on their own terms, so finding out how customers want to engage your web is really important. Doing that via customer segmentation is a key part of that approach. A lot of times stories rule the day within organizations, and people believe that because they heard a story from someone that that's what should be built as far as a site is concerned. But doing primary research will really help uncover what the best entry point is. Certainly, as Johan mentioned, sharing solutions by using customer language in your website's architecture and with the sales staff as well is really important. And number 3, engaging the sales team in this process is critical. There are a lot of things that are up for grabs and in question whenever someone starts moving the cheese around a sales organization. So engaging the sales folks for their specific industry knowledge and also where they think their customers might find digital assets most valuable is really, really important. All right, so we're going to move into our next sin. The second digital sin is that of vanity. And this one is very interesting. We're going to call it like it is. Obviously, I am Vice President of Sales and Marketing at a services organization, right? So that is my point of view. But I see this over and over again, and it's really important to talk about. Manufacturers and distributors that force the staff to build everything in-house and don't have a culture and experience of outsourcing have some real challenges on their hands that are preventing them from getting to where they need to go. Certainly companies realize that digital is important and that there is a major buyer's market, rather candidate market when it comes to digital talent right now. 80% of companies are increasing their digital marketing budgets to hire talent specifically to meet the need within digital marketing. And this isn't just for the sexy stuff like campaigns and advertising. This includes the hardcore data backend stuff like product information management and managing the channels that are really important. The challenges that most in-house companies have talked about having with hiring involve finding the talent to begin with, the cost of that staff, attracting and retaining them certainly, and is it a cultural fit? A lot of manufacturers and distributors have a very bootstrap mentality where they're building things themselves from the ground up, and it doesn't necessarily fit to begin hiring in-house for real cultural change. And so because of that, over half of B2B marketing teams are outsourcing at least some of their workload to agencies. That's really important. When we get into IT, we find that that number is even lower. And if you don't have experience managing an outside vendor, that creates a challenge in being someone's first partner because there are a lot of things to learn. So from our point of view, in-house capabilities, when we've seen projects, and this is not limited to small companies, as Johan can attest to in just a moment, we see this with very large companies as well. Typically, in-house teams, they have a couple of challenges with them. One is that they can fall victim to unnecessary customization because a VP wants it or someone from the top down says we need to do it this way. Things get customized rather than using out-of-the-box solutions. You end up with a team of generalists who are required to do a lot of different things, and they certainly carry a lot of good tribal knowledge about your company, but they aren't benefiting from additional exposure across a broad category of industries. Technology can be seen as a quick fix and just put it in. You can have projects that get built and left behind, and certainly as internal priorities change and that sort of thing, you can have time lags that happen. Someone goes on leave or something else that certainly affects projects. However, if you're working with an outside agency, which I do see some manufacturers turning to, certainly we work with many distributors as well that have said, hey, we're ready for digital transformation, and we know we need to get some outside help to accelerate these projects. They gain some serious benefits. They're typically hiring because they don't want to build internal expertise in something outside of what they're already really good at. They're really good at building whatever that is that they're building, their products or services. Or for distributors, they're great at fulfillment and their delivery network. They don't need to become an expert in a Salesforce implementation or building out a product information management practice. Agencies like myself and our teams have fresh ideas. We usually have bandwidth and availability, of course, although that's becoming rarer as digital becomes more in demand. But I think this is the single most important thing for everyone on this webinar. They also learn from other companies' mistakes. So when you hire an outside resource, you get to benefit from all of the mistakes they've made elsewhere or seen other companies have challenges with. And while each manufacturer and distributor has a lot of unique things about them, there are many problems that are very, very similar, which is why our company continues to bring value in solving the same problems over and over again. So that's our point of view on that. And Johan, I know you've seen some very large companies, even some Fortune 500, that have cobbled together things in-house over the years that have caused them some significant setbacks.
Yeah, that's true. We do a lot of business with large enterprises, and many of them have built their own solutions, and they're now replatforming to InRiver. I think the reason is that, I mean, I think all can agree on that we live in the most fast-paced time ever in history, and that it's just moving faster for every day. And keeping up with those market requirements is a huge undertaking, and it requires both resources and as you said, real domain expertise and learning from others' mistakes. And companies like InRiver and Antara has both the knowledge and the solutions, and they are laser focused on omnichannel commerce, not on all kinds of IT or all kinds of marketing. And building your own solutions and your own teams might be great for like Amazon, but very few others can do that successfully. So I think that we can definitely see a trend where we are replatforming homebrewed solutions to InRiver for a reason.
Thank you for that. So how do we save you? How do you save yourselves from the sin of vanity? If you are able to work with an outside agency and it's your first time selecting one, there are a lot of things to look for. Or if this is your 10th time looking for one, these things always ring true. And believe me, you have as much, especially if you're working on an IT-focused marketing project, you have as much responsibility and bearing on whether that will be successful based on your internal culture and your internal ability to manage the vendor as the vendor has with their own skill set. But when you're looking for this outside help, it's important to understand the team that you're working with, their resources, their skill, and their knowledge. It's very important that they need to be able to demonstrate work experience to you, not just say, yeah, we've handled it, no problem. But also we would invite our prospective customers to say, show me, take me into the code, show me examples of this working in real life that you've actually built and deployed, and let me talk to those customers. So verifying that is really important. Certainly gauging experience regarding their professionalism and credibility, the case studies that they can bring to bear, and again, the customer sources that they are able to bring to you to tell great stories is important. Another part is somewhat of a cultural and personality fit. So if you're looking at a Marcom project that is heavy in the technical space, you will need some sort of solutioning on your own business processes that you have internally. Even the most flexible piece of software is probably going to require some sort of customization to meet your internal needs, and or your business processes are going to have to change to get associated with it. And you want to make sure that whoever you work with has got credible staff that understands manufacturing and distribution and is able to bring to you some skills to help to solve your problems and not just shove a piece of software at it. And then finally, ensuring transparency. Measuring performance, agreeing together what makes the project successful goes a long way towards making sure that everyone reaches the end of the project feeling that it was a great way to spend time and money. Our third digital sin for manufacturers and distributors is fear. And this is ignoring omnichannel opportunities. If I haven't offended anybody so far, I'm probably going to do it here. So I'm going to watch the attendees and see if any drop off. But this is important. This is my soapbox here. If you are a manufacturer or a distributor and you refuse to sell any way but through distribution, and let's take the word sell away. If you refuse to engage with your buyer, with your end customer in any way except through your channels, and you refuse to talk to them directly, you are going to be in trouble. Amazon is going to come and eat your lunch. There are all sorts of things that will occur. The reason for this is that we'll talk about it a little bit later, the sort of science and the marketing things that are going on behind it. But every brand, regardless of whether you're selling you feel as a commodity or something that may be a grudge purchase within the B2B world, every brand needs to have a relationship with their consumer. And when we're talking about omnichannel, we're not talking about multi-channel, where all of the channels are available to the customer, or to the consumer, to the buyer, but they're not integrated. So yes, I can hit the site on mobile, or I can transact in store, or I can transact on the web. But with an omnichannel, all of those things are connected. And to illustrate that, I'm going to take you to a more consumer-centric example. And I want you to hang with me, because I do this with a lot of manufacturers and distributors who say, this has nothing to do with me, but if they hang on until the end, they understand the point. So going back to our Roman friends who inspired some of the slides earlier, let's look at something like pizza to illustrate what omnichannel really is. In the ancient times, and that includes up until about 1999, 2000, the only way for you to get pizza would be to go to a pizzeria and to walk in, make your order, either take it home with you or to eat it there. Certainly with a telephone, you could phone it in and pick it up, but that's not really the point. That's a single channel way of interacting. Today, pizza has become an incredibly omnichannel experience where you can, as a consumer, you can actually tweet an emoji of a pizza to certain pizza chains and they will deliver a pizza to you. That's the only interaction you need. Domino's is now delivering not just to physical locations, but to such as those with an address, but to hotspots. So beaches, park benches, city squares, that sort of thing, wherever consumers want their pizza. And Pizza Hut actually released these pie tops This is their second version in as many years, where you can order pizzas with your shoes. With a tap of the shoe, it's actually integrated into Bluetooth on your phone. And these 2018 versions also have a pause button for your television. They go for about $450 on eBay if you are interested in a pair. But the point is, if we can create an omnichannel experience where a consumer can tweet from Twitter, and then they could hit the website and see the status of their order, and then walk outside and receive the pizza on the beach or wherever they're at. If we can create that for pizza, and over 50% of the workforce and buyer is going to be a millennial in 2 years, how much more important is that creating that experience going to be for something like a critical spare part for heavy machinery or medical equipment or life-saving medication or other things wherein consumers are expecting this experience elsewhere? You don't have to create pie tops or an emoji for whatever it is you're manufacturing or distributing, but you should pay attention to this and look for opportunities to create disruption within your industry and be easier to do business with on an omnichannel basis, even as the manufacturer or the distributor, than anybody else. The payoff for you is huge. Omnichannel customers are more valuable. This is B2B, B2C, this is across the board. Omnichannel customers, those that are engaged across multiple channels, they spend 4% more in-store and 10% more online than single-channel customers. So this has been a really sobering statistic and a great way to get some green lights on pilot projects for omnichannel for manufacturers and distributors when they see that it typically is going to pay for itself and then some. Not to mention the fact this gives you a data advantage over your competitors who aren't interacting with their clients this way. Johan, anything you'd like to add on the omnichannel opportunities? I'm sure that you see a lot of this with the branded manufacturers and distributors that you're working with.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of focus on getting data to the retailers and to the marketplaces and to the distributors, and to get that information consistently delivered so we get consistent information across channels. But I think that's more or less mandatory to succeed with omnichannel commerce today. I think, however, you need to also have the right context for each buyer, because buyers need a context, whether they're buying spare parts or accessories, because some come in to look for a solution that requires a spare part. Others come in looking for a solution that requires an accessory. They might come in from completely different angles. They might have completely different queries to ask your system. But at the end of the day, they might buy the same SKU. So you need to cater to both. And I think that's really crucial in order to understand the omnichannel customer, because the persona is not enough anymore. You got to understand the context of their situation and then provide them with a solution.
Absolutely. So how can you save yourself from fear of the omnichannel presence? Certainly you can begin by integrating your sales channels as much as possible. So what that practically means is using data to give your sales team visibility into the online activity and your online support staff activity into the sales activity outside of that channel. That's a great place to start, being able to just, even in an analog way, have the salesperson know what kind of online orders are happening for you already. If you don't have e-commerce, certainly finding a way to unify that customer and see them as one entity across all of your channels is important. Number 3, having a pricing strategy that is consistent across all channels is key. You wouldn't believe how many big companies that we talk to that don't have their pricing centralized in a way that is controlled within a singular system. Most of the time it's kind of all over the place. And then number 4, which leads us directly into our next sin, is keeping your brand voice consistent. Because after all, if you are finally engaging with your end user in a way that you haven't been before, you need to pay attention to the brand and the experience that they're getting each time that they interact with you. And that brings us to our 4th digital sin, which is that of apathy. And that's a lack of control of your digital brand. We're going to illustrate this in a really fun way in just a minute. But what's important here is that we know that savvy shoppers are scouring the internet for the lowest price. B2B buyers are in a different space, but they still do price comparisons and often have a choice when it comes to whom they're buying from. And manufacturers and distributors need to use product information management to ensure that all of these things are consistent across the channels. We know that. But But what that enables you to do is if you can stop worrying about am I controlling, or does each retailer, does each e-tailer have the right information, you can start to focus more on the branded experience itself. We talk to so many manufacturers and distributors that their product teams, their marketing teams spend all their time chasing down issues with the product data and validity, and is Home Depot getting what they want, is Lowe's getting what they want, that they aren't able to control the experience with the brand at all. So to give you an example of that, we're going to take you to Amazon. We're going to talk about the battle of the babies and how this sin can manifest itself even for major consumer brands. This is very interesting, and because I've been giving, those of you who know me, I've been giving this baby wipe example ever since I saw someone do it at a Gartner conference maybe 3 years ago, and the reason being that it's continued to evolve and change every year, but the message stays the same. So Pampers, as everyone knows, is more of a traditional brand oriented. They're relying here, if you're looking at baby wipes, something that everybody needs. Talk about something that is definitely unsexy, definitely hard to differentiate in the marketplace. They rely on Amazon really heavily on their brand itself. So you have the wipes here, and it used to be when we started doing this a couple of years ago, it was just this. They had a picture of their product. There wasn't any information about them, and that was it. Since then, they've added a little bit of information, a couple of bullet points here. Just see here, 1, 2, 3, little romance copy, and that's it. And their very top comment is, it used to be great until they started changing their packaging. Now, if you compare that with a product by Amazon, and Amazon has their product information on lock, where all of that information is taken care of, and you see the care that they've taken in the actual branded experience with this product online, it is night and day. They have multiple images, very high-res imagery that you're able to go through and scroll over, see the size of it. They've got video talking about how wonderful it is. But here's where it starts to get really interesting, because their page has evolved a lot over the years too. They've got key icons for all of the things. They've done data mining within their reviews and realized what people had questions about and were concerned with. They've done data mining and offered up at a glance items there. They've also got this beautifully told story about the purified water and the aloe and their supplier. Even questions about who are the babies that are in the actual ads, saying, hey, they're Amazon employees' kids, that sort of thing. And their reviews, every question is answered, and all of the reviews, if there are any negative ones, have strong responses to them. So Amazon, with something as mundane as baby wipes, has turned it into a fantastic customer experience that really outsells Pampers on their site and gives everyone else a run for their money. So really interesting example of how product data enables them to control the branded experience in a way that the Pampers brand cannot. So the question is there, and how do you save yourself from that? If you're spending all your time chasing things down and not able to control that branded experience, number one, you want to understand how that data impacts the brand. So if your product data, if you're spending your time doing that, ask yourself what kind of experience people are having with it, and what could you do to solve that problem. And then if you're able to keep that data consistent, which we'll show you how in just a minute, you're going to be able to spend more time making sure that your branded experience is one that is memorable and helps to convert customers. All right, we are rounding out our digital sins here with the sin of indifference, and that is a lack of product data standardization. And just to keep us on time, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly here through these. But one of the big challenges with individual manufacturers and distributors, and retailers contribute hugely to this, is that everyone wants something a little bit differently, and people are not able to standardize on them. We know that consumer would understand this and see what that looks like if their price is wrong, you're missing a description, or there's an old image on the site. But where this really wreaks havoc is within an organization. Most manufacturers and distributors, we just picked on a couple of technologies here. We know these are just representative in terms of Google Drive and the AS400 ERP system. But if each one of your customers, and distributors, or for distributors, we retailers or wholesalers, needs different information, this creates a huge problem of being able to manage this on the back end. And so if everyone is calling something else different, each data field that you have to manage on the back end has got to be mapped and managed by human beings most of the time. And that can multiply and just explode into a sea of complications causing you a lot of problems. A couple of industries that have sought to solve this problem, one is the automotive industry. They have some things called, the acronyms spell out ACEs and PIEs for information standardization across all of their channels. And there's an emerging example of this in the healthcare industry, Distributors Association, where they have banded together about 100 healthcare manufacturers and 100 healthcare products distributors, and are standardizing on 23 key fields and then 93 extended fields, what those are each called. So this is like height, width, and length, but then also things that are specific to healthcare organizations, like if something's sanitized or not, that sort of thing. And they're standardizing on those across all of the industry members. So this has a lot of promise to help create consistency and to stop this explosion of data that's causing a lot of challenges within the manufacturing and distribution industry. Johan, I'm curious if you've seen, as quickly as the automotive and the healthcare industry is working here, is this something that you have seen really taking root in other industries that you work within, or have you seen challenges across the industries?
Well, I think it's across industries. There's a need for standardization, especially when you want to exchange data between buyers and sellers in the B2B space. And it's, of course, great because standardization makes things so much easier for everyone involved, including in River and Entera. But when you are providing the data to sort of a data pool, which is often the end game for this kind of data, you must adhere to that standard. And that's great, but it's typically just specifications and one image. And it's often about logistical information and not so much information that can actually assist the buyer to make a purchasing decision. So when you're providing data to the data pool, you can adhere to the standard. But when you are providing data on your own websites, brand websites, commerce initiatives, you should definitely augment that data to tell your own product story, because you believe that your products are the best and you need to convince the buyers that they are. And that cannot be done with just specification data or logistical information and a single pack shot. So you need to cater to this, but you also need to augment it. Otherwise, you will have a hard time convincing buyers to buy.
Absolutely. That's similar to the brand control story, where it starts with standardization, and that's the foundation that allows you to be able to have the brand be expressed, as well as you to tell your product story through differentiated content. So saving yourself from the sin of indifference, this is a tough one. This is one is much more difficult to do because it really does rely on collaboration within your industry. If you don't have an industry association that you can work with, then you really need to take it upon yourself to be able to start doing that with maybe a handful of retailers or a handful of suppliers, or someone that you can say, you know what, we're all calling this field something different. Let's settle on this standard and go from there. You can also get some customized programmable solutions. Certainly, In River's product offers some standardization options that are there as well, and we can do a lot with code, but code costs time and money, and so this is the better route to go if you're able to. And then the second item there, if you can find an industry organization that will help you to do this, that's certainly the way to go. So check in your industry to see if they've got PIM standards, or if they're interested in starting a PIM work group, product information management work group, to help you achieve saving yourself from this sin. All right, the second to last of these 7 deadly digital sins is laziness. And this is the idea that if you aren't providing value, someone else will. I think we've touched on this a little bit throughout, where relying on someone else to have the final interaction and to really care about the interaction with your customer in the end is not the best way to go. 81% of buyers across B2B research online before buying, even for routine reorders, of course. And what can happen with that as manufacturers, if they are taking advantage of an omnichannel situation, or if distributors are doing the same thing, they actually can end up separating the product creation and delivery from the rest of the value chain, because buyers want to go direct frequently, even in the B2B space. It becomes very important for them to do that. And this manufacturer here on the left can just as easily be a distributor that can disrupt the traditional process by offering information that is valuable and experience that is valuable to that end user. And if you don't do it, again, someone else is going to do so. There's some very famous example of providing value with data. And this one's, it's kind of old hat, so we're going to take a new twist on it in just a moment. But I think most people are familiar with what Target has done with their pregnancy predictor. The famous example was there was a father of a teenage girl who started receiving items for maternity care and neonatal care coupons from Target delivered to his house for his teenage daughter, who hadn't yet told them that she was pregnant. And Target's algorithms had predicted that she needed those supplies based on buying unscented lotion and baby vitamins at the store. And that, of course, triggered all sorts of issues around personalization, a lot of concern. It makes for a great story. But Target built this infrastructure that could help figure out what a consumer needed before that person necessarily even knew it themselves or was able to articulate it. Now, if that was the end of the story, again, when I talk to manufacturers and distributors, I hear them say, yes, but that's a retailer. Yes, but that's consumer. Well, guess who else is doing this? Grainger, instead of the guest ID, they're doing this level of personalization and providing value with the buyer ID in a B2B environment. So they're doing the same thing in terms of A/B testing the color of conversion buttons. They removed the left rail of navigation from their website as a result of A/B testing, where for a long time that was very much a sacred cow of B2B website design, was to have a left rail with faceted search in it that allowed you to quickly winnow down into the choices that you needed to make. Grainger did some A/B testing and found out for their buyers it made no difference at all, so they pulled it off in order to increase transactions via freeing up some screen real estate. So they're doing this too, and Grainger is a huge player. But with their network of retail stores and their omnichannel presence, it would be very easy for them to sit back and just say, nope, people are buying from us in the same way. But the way that they're winning big is by doing very small incremental changes with their digital presence and site, because they've got their foundation taken care of. They're able to experiment actively and become the next level target story. I don't know what that would look like in the B2B space with what everyone manufactures and distributes, but for what it's worth, they're making huge gains in doing that. So how to free yourself from the sin of laziness? Certainly finding out what you can get your hands on as far as data is concerned is really important. And generating personas around that data is also very important too. Again, I would encourage everyone to start small and not big. Don't try to take on a Herculean project. Find out where you can make those 7, 8, 11% gains in conversions or average order size, and use that data in a reinvesting model to get more information about your top customers, or ones that may even actively allow you to experiment. If you say, hey, we'd like to change these things on your site, is that okay? Number 3 is mapping out your content strategy. So once you have those personas in place, it's very important to understand what content you're going to put in place to woo those specific customers or to experiment with them. Number 4, I've already hit on creating a pilot. And number 5, don't be afraid to personalize any aspect of the customer experience. From someone hitting your homepage as a prospective B2B buyer, all the way through understanding at what level if someone's logged in to make a purchase through your system via punch-out, there may be a small space you're able to do some personalization with and sit back and see what the results are. But the important thing is don't be lazy here. Don't rely just on what the software or your current sites do today, because that's not going to get you to where you need to be. And our final digital sin is the sin of negligence. And this one should not come as a surprise when it comes to the folks you have speaking on the phone for you today, but negligence in the form of bad product data management. This product data is the lifeblood of your organization. It's the way that people know what to buy, why to buy it, and if you're not managing it correctly, it's going to cause problems within your organization. Got some quick stats for you here. 87% of B2B buyers said they would be unlikely to repeat a purchase with a vendor who provided inaccurate product information. 40% of buyers have returned an online purchase because of inaccurate product content, and 30% have abandoned an online shopping cart due to poor product descriptions. We've all been there, right? We've all bought something that was not correct, or you aren't able to get the statistic or the product data that you need on a site, and so you simply don't buy it and you turn away. So why is this problem so prevalent? Well, it turns out that over 80% of companies are not confident in their product data. This is something that has grown throughout the years and organically, particularly within manufacturers and distributors, because that's not necessarily where all of their skills and talents have been poured into, have been in managing product data. But the digital channels, as they've grown, the demands on accurate, clean, complete product data has become more and more important. And so focusing on this provides the foundation for being able to move into the other channels as we've described. Finally, nearly 30% of the item data in catalogs used by retailers and manufacturers is incorrect. That's just shocking. And I can tell you, as a company that does a lot of PIM implementations and manages a lot of data for manufacturers and distributors, this isn't surprising. I would actually put this as higher. Bad product data is the #1 delay in the projects that we are working on, both custom and standard. So not surprised there, but certainly we've hit over the head all of the issues that can come from having bad product data, but this digital sin of negligence is one that has to be improved because there's simply no way around it. And Johan, I know that you've seen this. This is, as an evangelist for In River, this is part and core of why it is that you built the product that you did. And it'd be very interesting to hear your perspective on where you're seeing this at its most critical state for distributors and manufacturers.
Yeah, well, I believe it is, and I think that, I mean, we've been on a war against the Excel spreadsheets and Excel purgatory for 11 years now, and today, I mean, quality and consistency of the data and the richness of the product information, they're baseline requirements, and very few can meet those baseline requirements. And we always heard that content is king, and I still believe content is king. But in today's world, especially in the B2B world, context is King Kong. And you need to be able to present solutions in the buyer's context, so to making it easier for the buyer to buy. If the buyer is looking for a spare part for a truck, he needs to have the context to be at least make, model, year of the vehicle. Otherwise, he won't find the spare part. And if he has a hard time finding a solution to his problem, he'll go to your competitor instead. So all things that are mentioned previously on your slides are important tools to provide a great product experience. But we also shouldn't forget to add a subject matter expertise that is needed in order to get that context in the buying experience. Because making it easier for buyers to buy is what PIM is all about in the long run. We can create operational efficiencies and save money in the process, but at the end game is always making it easier for buyers to buy, because then they buy more and they return.
Absolutely. We saw something similar back in the early 2000s, or 2010s rather, when it came to manufacturers and distributors selling more directly, either in a B2B e-commerce environment or direct to consumers, wherein they were worried about taking away sales from their other channels. And Forrester started reporting on this in, I think, 2010, and saying, look, for every dollar that's spent online in an e-tailer, in an e-commerce environment, there are $6 more that are being spent on that manufacturer's or distributor's products in a store. And the reason for that is because those e-commerce projects, just like the PIM projects you're describing, provide the technology foundation and the clean data by virtue of having those projects, because you can't automate without them. They provide the clean data that results in higher conversions and letting manufacturers and distributors focus on what they do best. So to end our formal presentation here, very quickly, how to save yourself from the final and seventh deadly digital sin for manufacturers and distributors is to get started by centralizing your product data with a product information management platform. That's so important. It is growing like crazy. I know In River has the growth that it does, and so does Intara, because of this movement that's happening for manufacturers and distributors. As part of that project, centralizing the data, it has to be transformed to get into those systems, which is where the cleaning of the data comes from, using bulk editing and automation workflows in order to clean that data and ensure that it meets the standards. And certainly running data validation processes. You can do that from a supplier standpoint if you are a distributor as well, to ensure they meet your standards before that goes live into any of your digital channels with the InRiver product or other PIM platforms. And that's a key component of making sure that your negligence is resolved and you can avoid that sin in your world. So with that, that ends our formal presentation. We've allowed some times for questions here. Hopefully you've had a chance to submit a few into the moderator. If you haven't, please use the chat window to do that now. You can submit those and Diane will moderate that for us, and Johan and I are available to take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Andy. We do have our first question from Jonathan. Jonathan works for a manufacturer and noted that Grainger is a great B2B example. However, as working for a manufacturer, they don't sell direct through e-commerce and rely on the Graingers of the world to sell their product. How does your example or model apply to manufacturers that don't sell direct?
I think the answer to that is pretty simple. One, you got to get good quality product data and content to the Graingers of the world, all the marketplaces, all the resellers, all the distributors, because they are not going to be more successful in selling your products than the data you provide to them gives them the possibility to be successful. And secondly, as we can see from Andy's examples, B2B buyers, they actually go to the manufacturer's site to find the correct information and to find a more elaborate product story. So your brand websites, your product websites, they're really important sales tools. Even though the order might go to Grainger, they will place the order to Grainger because they've seen good product information on your websites and your commerce initiatives.
Excellent, thanks. Our next question is from Susan, and she works for a manufacturer, and she asks, what are best practices for trying to rely less on sales data and more on product data?
I'll take that one. I think that it's important when you are trying to transform an organization, because that's at the heart of Susan's question, is moving from a sales-driven organization into more of a data-driven one. The two really have to go, and they have to grow hand in hand. Because if you're going to move into an e-commerce environment, or even one that just gets measured like an e-commerce environment, I've been through a lot of these projects where unless you're working with the head of sales, you're going to have some real challenges and pushback from the sales team, because it legitimately is moving their cheese. It's making it difficult for them to understand. It may seem like a black box and like someone's trying to harm their customer relationship. But proving that value out, the great thing about anything digital is it's more measurable than any sales interaction ever will be. And I think that the digital content, if it's improved, and will also result in better interactions by the salespeople with the end consumers, as Johan said, because it is all interconnected. So I think there's a lot to unpack there that in Susan's question, but aligning with the sales leadership within an organization to find out where their concerns are and what they're being measured on is a great place to start using data within the organization to transform the manufacturer distributor.
Thank you. Our next question came from Richard. How can manufacturing teams ensure they stay consistent with product information with continuous product innovation and releases?
Oh, that is actually a tough question to answer because it depends a lot on the organization. But I would say that the PIM, as a part of the solution, needs to be integrated with the rest of the systems and the processes that are involved when you are innovating. So many of our customers have or are investing in product lifecycle management or product data management solutions, where the engineers and the creative teams are coming up with new innovative solutions. if you integrate this into a single process, your go-to-market will be faster, and you will be able to tell great product stories long before you actually even manufacture the product. So getting having a holistic view on this and looking at the whole process, not just the marketing piece of it or not just the sales piece of it, is important in order to get there.
Thank you, Johan. I think we have time for one last question. I have one here from Simon. What roles do you typically see within organizations that are driving change in the areas of PIM? For example, what types of roles would you have taking a closer look at the product information?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, certainly. From our perspective, it varies tremendously. It's something where a lot of times most digital marketing obviously is coming from the marketing department, but PIM is different, and we're typically seeing that being driven more by IT, more by a director of IT, or even a chief information officer or a chief digital officer within a company that recognizes the need for supplying infrastructure and consistency in that product data throughout the to achieve the organization's goals. But it really has varied. I mean, we've talked to everyone from digital marketing managers that are responsible for the creative and campaigns, all the way through that CIO level that is interested in standardizing this. Product teams, product data management teams are certainly involved as well. But those that are driving change, I think, are more frequently involved in IT, although it is a cross-departmental project because marketing has got to interface with the tool usually more than IT does, but IT has to help supply the tie-ins into the ERP and other critical systems to make sure that it's a successful project. That's a tough question. There's a lot involved there, but I think that that's where we would start.
Well, thank you, Andy. That concludes our time for today. Thank you all for joining us. We will be posting a recording of this presentation to the InRiver website and appreciate your time. Any unanswered questions that remain in this chat panel, we will be reaching out to you directly via email. Thank you and have a fantastic day.